Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. Welcome, everyone. You know it is Second Friday. The second Friday of every month, we get to chat with a travel writer who is a member of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association, who we call IFTWA. It's if you go to IFWT, well, I can't even say it, ifwtwa.org. You can check out their site and learn more about what they do. They do awesome conferences and networking events for writers and destinations. And today we get to meet one of the members, Felicia Stitzel. She is the first time on our show, and she is known as the Backpacker Mom. Not only does she backpack all over the world and take her kids with her, especially her daughter, she likes to drink wine while she's doing it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Top 8 family-friendly wineries in and around Seattle. She's got a great article about it. You can check it out on our site, blendradioandtv.com. The link is in the episode notes as well as her article, her link. So welcome, Felicia. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is cool. So, taking your kids out to a winery, this was not done back in the day because it used to be la-di-da going to wineries. And I think they had to un-la-di-da themselves, really, and be more open to their clientele, to get the clientele. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that there's actually a lot of misconception with that because if you think about it, and of course that's like a US mindset, right? That we have this very very high class. You go to a winery, first thing that you think about is going to a classy winery. You always think of like Napa Valley and Sonoma and those very high end wineries. And there's this mindset around that where you think that you can't go to a winery with your kids because it's frowned upon. This is a very classy place. And that's a very US mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you go back to, in wine talk and text kind of deal, we're a new world wine. But if you go back to old world wine, which is all over Europe, the mindset is completely different because it's a generational thing. So kids are brought up working in the wineries with their families, the traditions and the culture of working at a winery and being a cellar rat and cleaning out the tanks and going and helping with harvest. Children are brought into that culture if your family owns a winery from a very young age. And even as consumers, and there's so many people who, family is such a centric thing in European culture
Mm-hmm.
where you take your kids to the store and there's a wine tasting, or you go to a restaurant and you kids are out playing while you're doing the 7-course meal. And it's very different mindset because family is brought into every aspect, including going to wineries. But wineries in general, the whole wine industry is such a family, generational thing that it's almost strange to think about kids not being at the winery once
Mm-hmm.
you kind of change your perspective on that.
Yeah, I grew up in my teenage years in South Africa
Mm,
and, lived in Kenya, England, all these other places beforehand. But, and in England, kids are allowed in the pubs.
yep.
The kids were even in Kenya, like, um, now there were some restrictions when we first got to South Africa for women in certain
Okay.
areas. Yeah, so it was kind of like this is the men's only place. Like
Ah,
not like what we would say as a gentleman's club here is not what we're talking about. Okay.
right.
Yeah.
No.
We're not talking about those. But so it's very, it's like almost like really old school that way. But it kind of changed, by the time we left, it had changed in the like early 90s.
Okay.
Um, so I'm dating myself. This is what's happened as soon as you got on here. I was like, okay.
Sorry, I
But
didn't mean to
anyway,
do
so
that.
but yeah, we were raised with wine.
Hmm.
You go to a restaurant, if your parents are with you and you're 14 to 16, you're allowed to have a glass of wine with your dinner, and everybody learns how to drink wine. And I don't know, carafes were everybody had carafes of wine.
Right.
And
And then even
it's normal.
like Denmark even, or a lot of those Nordic countries, I mean, they take their um the schnapps. That's part of a normal breakfast in Denmark, and that starts at a
Oh,
young,
wait a minute.
even in. Even when you're in high school, that's something that starts at a young age. And it's a different perspective because, here we are as Americans talking about bringing your kids to wineries, and just look at the culture difference and perspectives of, how so many European countries, they introduce alcohol in moderation and as part of their
Mhm.
culture at a young age, whereas here we are, in the US where it's, shame on you if you bring your kids to wineries. It's very, people turn their nose up at you. You can't have alcohol till you're 21, and just talk about like just total differences.
Yeah. I yeah, I think it's good to have the education. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, South Africa's a heavy drinking culture when I was there. I don't know now, but it looks like it
I
from
think
my
it still
friends.
is.
Everybody's still there. I think we're all still there. But there's a difference. And like, you see people binge drink when they turn 21 or 18 in this country, and they just don't have that background of that knowledge,
Yeah.
so it's like the first time I had too much wine, it was under my mom's watch. And boy, did she bounce on my bed that next morning.
Well, of course. I mean, that's a rite of passage.
And she was like, "Do you want some bacon?" And I'm like, "No, I don't." And she was like, "Do you want to drink it?" No. You ever want to do that again? No.
Right.
So,
And you got to go through this experience where it was safe and controlled environment where
yep,
you've kind of had a life lesson.
better than doing it at spring break.
Hmm.
Seriously. As a mom, right? You don't want your daughter doing that. Nuh-uh.
No.
No, no, but she's now gone to all these wineries, and you take your infant son as well, and you've taken her around the world. So tell me a little bit about that when you decided, hey, I'm doing this awesome site. Everyone, the backpackermom.com, go check it out. She's got e-guides on there. She's got winery group parties going. You got all kinds of things going on there. You've been doing this for a while.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, so I've
yeah,
had the site for going on 10 years. I
cool.
started blogging. So my background is actually in photography. And
Okay.
it's this weird journey that kind of led me into the wine industry. I started in the wine industry as a marketer, social media marketer, at
Hmm.
this tiny winery in Nowheresville, Idaho. And my husband is active
Wow.
military, so we just got moved there. And it was June. I remember this so vividly. So it's beginning, this is ramping up to big tourist season, and lots of people are coming in. And the winery owner asked me during my interview, he was like, "So what do you know about wine?" Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah. He goes, "Do you like wine?" Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah. Okay. Do you know anything about wine? No, no, I do not. I like wine. I know nothing about wine. But I knew marketing, and I told him, I was like, look, I know a lot about marketing. What my skill set is very valuable, and I learn fast. And so I promise that if you hire me, I will dedicate myself so that way I'm not starting way behind going into the busiest season of the year. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to learn, and I'm going to learn fast, and I'm going to turn all of that knowledge into content to market for the winery. And he decided to take a risk on me. So that's exactly what I did. I always joke, my friend Neil Glancy, he's the guy who taught me. He's the winery, he was the winemaker at the time. And we're still very good friends to this day. Every time I go back to Idaho, I always make sure that I see him and try his new wine, which is always delicious. But I straight up almost stalked him. Like I knew his comings and goings. I wanted him to teach me everything. So he took me out to the vineyards during planting and planting new vines and all of that process. He took me into the winery cellar and taught me about, the importance of cleaning everything and how a cellar is his laboratory and his spice rack. And I mean, all of these things. And I just fell in love with it.
Mm,
I was this beautiful combination between art and science. And it was
yeah,
I finally could enjoy and understand. And I just
yeah.
kind of dove off the deep end with the wine stuff. But originally, I was a traveler and I just wanted to go around and take pictures. My goal was to be a National Geographic photographer. That was
Oh
my
my gosh, you're with
goal.
me, girl. Yes. But I
Absolutely.
wanted to do war photography first. It's
Oh,
a
yep,
thing from growing up in Africa and wanted people to see what was happening. But
yep.
it was
There's
National Geographic. We just did a podcast. We're all talking about, who we want to thank for our inspirations. I'm all like, National Geographic. And I wanted to own the
Geographic,
press
and then there
too.
was actually a war photographer who I loved her. Her name is
Mm.
Lindsay. Lindsay ago. I have to look that up again, but
Mm.
first name's Lindsay, and she's been a war correspondent for, I mean, decades and decades. And she wrote a book about it, and it just totally inspired me. So I kind of went along with that too for a while. But
So, hey, we're
got
good buddies here. We
married,
like wine, we like war photography.
right? I'm just kind of all over the place.
Let's do National Geographic, sounds a little bit calmer. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, I started getting, I'm a traveler, so I have this background now
Mm.
in traveling. I now have fallen in love with the wine industry, and then I got pregnant. And so I was working still at the winery for many years. Well, I guess not many years, a few years after I had my daughter. And I had this part-time where I was working from home, but then I was also working at the winery. My husband, again, active duty military. So we didn't have a support system. So I didn't have somebody who I could just drop
Yeah.
with. Um, we couldn't afford daycare, so I took her to the winery with me. And this began this whole mindset change of having your kids at wineries because I had no other option when I got started. And it helped that I worked at the winery, so there was a lot of grace given.
Hmm.
And obviously, you have to know your kids for this. Like if you have a Tasmanian devil child, maybe don't go to
Yeah.
the winery or sit outside. If they've got an
Yeah. You want the outdoor ones. Yeah.
outside,
Let them
sit
run.
outside,
Yeah.
enjoy the outdoors so that way they can run around and be crazy and not disrupt everybody. But there's a way to balance everything. And so I got started because I had no other option. And then I started realizing that as I started going wine tasting at other places to, again, expand my knowledge, my palate, trying different places, really dove down head first into the whole wine industry and wanting to be educated about it. Um, again, I had to take my daughter with me, and I started seeing how people were reacting to me bringing my daughter to places that, even though that they say that they're family friendly, the
Mm.
people who are also tasting wines at the winery with me, they are making faces at me and they're turning their nose up. And I said, well, well.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to be here and she's allowed to be here. And so long as we're not disrupting anybody, you guys can go be
Yeah.
fancy somewhere else.
Well, yeah, I think it's just also wineries changed. I always talk about how breweries came in were like fun.
Hmm.
And you know what? And got to the younger generation, whereas wineries tended to miss the younger generation boat. Now it's changing,
Well, they
you
had
know.
to.
Yeah.
I think that, and it's funny enough that I actually learned that while on this crazy wine adventure that I took my daughter with me when we were living overseas. We went to Portugal a lot,
Hmm.
and we learned about port. So we went to Porto,
Oh,
we
yeah.
went to Douro Valley, and we went to all these
Mm.
port houses. And one of the things that really resonated with me was that they had to change port because their demographic that was drinking port was all dying off. And so they had to
Oh,
change it. So then they invented pink port, which you could
oh,
make into mixed drinks. And that's how you would get introduced to it, as this very like even keel drink where you could serve it over ice by itself. You could
huh.
put some soda water with it or a tonic. It could get mixed into
It's a
something,
sangria. Yeah.
right? So they had to reinvent themselves because their demographic was dying off, and the whole industry of port was going to disappear if they didn't change. And I think that it's very similar
Oh,
to what the wine industry had to do, is just like you said, they're missing.
liven up.
They,
Yeah. Now they have
oh, mom
concerts,
doesn't
and
want to go
it's
get
not.
some wine. Come
It
on now.
used to be concerts, and it would be, here's the quartet, and now like so many vineyards are having like big rock festivals, and
Bands and
yeah, I
live
mean heavy metal. I mean, it doesn't matter.
and yeah.
Yeah, bring it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that it's great that they did that. And again, this is a lot of the whole US mindset because, there's so much that they realized that people didn't want to go to a winery, and they felt like they had to dress up. And so one of the wineries that was one of the first ones I ever went to, that with my daughter outside of the one I worked at, their slogan was "Come as you are."
That's awesome.
And I loved that. And I just really embraced that. And so I would go and seek out other wineries that had that same type of mentality. And again, I just I dove headfirst off of the deep end with all of
Wow.
that. So it's really been a very interesting learning experience. And then we moved overseas and I started traveling all over Europe, taking my daughter to fancy places like the Douro Valley and Bordeaux and Champagne and all
Cool.
throughout Spain and I mean all of Germany and all down the Rhine River and into Luxembourg. I mean, we've gone everywhere. And everywhere that we go, we always do wine tastings and tours and all of these things. And she's always with me. And now
And
I've
that's awesome. What history for her, though?
oh,
To
absolutely.
learn the history because you're learning about the land, you're learning about the climate, you're learning so much science,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely. And I love that she
Yeah.
actually started partaking and was asking questions. And she was, it's funny now because I'll like put a glass up to her nose and swirl it around, and she'll give me her nose notes on it.
Yeah.
I
Her
mean,
nose report.
absolutely. Bring
But
her in.
that's awesome. Yeah, see, like my mom took me everywhere,
Mhm.
single mom taking me. I mean, I grew up in Africa and just now we're going to go here, we're going to go there. And that's how I fell into love affair of history and all those kinds of things that I didn't get from a textbook in school.
Exactly.
That's what spurred me on was travel. So I love that you're doing this with wineries here. And I think, I don't know, I think we're changing up a lot, and moms going out are always Instagramming and so they're realizing, hey, this is a marketing tool for
Yeah.
them too. So
And
I think
there's a
it's cool
huge
because the
culture change.
winery, yeah, the wineries you were mentioning in the Seattle area, obviously Woodinville. So we can focus on that too. But it seemed like some of them, you have 8 wineries, um, really focus on actually having like some activities for kids and making sure there's non-alcoholic beverages, maybe a coloring page. Like when you go to a restaurant, isn't it cool if they have like a family friendly dining and we'll give your
Right.
kid something to play with.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about a lot of these wineries that I listed out is, they have a good combination of one or several things where, like, if there's an outdoor patio area, then you can go sit outside. And that way you're not making as much noise for people who don't have kids. And so you're taking that into consideration, or you go earlier in the morning so there's less people. But so many of the wineries that I visited, especially here in Washington, I mean, they have snacks for kids that you don't have to order extra for. There is also more that you can order, but like little, like the taste
Yeah,
crackers and stuff, they give them a little bowl for themselves. They get water or juice that they just bring out for the kids. They have coloring books and coloring, different coloring items. Um, there was one winery that I went to that they just kind of set up a whole little corner for us. It was actually at J Bookwalter over in Woodinville,
okay,
and we got there first thing in the morning, and we sat out on the patio, but it was way too hot. It was Fourth of July weekend, and my
okay.
son was very little at the time, and so we moved back inside, and they just kind of set up a whole little corner for us, just kind of tucked away from everybody else, and we just had our own
Balance.
space where, if my son was being a little loud, then I wasn't disrupting anybody, but also we
Mm.
could just kind of have our own little bubble, and it was fabulous.
Well, which was the winery with the bubbles? The bubble, the
That's at
oh,
Saint Chapelle, or not Saint,
okay,
Chateau Saint Michel.
yeah, and that's an iconic winery in
It is.
Woodinville.
It's the
Yeah,
first
that's
winery
wasn't
in
the first one.
Washington.
Yeah,
Yep.
wow. So they had is did they still have them or was that just
Oh,
for
yeah.
COVID?
We just actually
Oh
we
wow,
went there in December of last year. I haven't been back since, but we went, and you can actually they have like a little fire pit in there,
no
and
way.
you have like a whole 3-course meal that's ordered out there. I mean, like you can rent the bubble for I think up to 3 hours.
You can rent a bubble.
You can
I
rent a
want to
bubble.
rent
It's
a
like one of those
bubble.
little igloo bubbles, but instead
Yeah,
being in like Finland where you see the like those iconic little bubbles, and you're not
yeah,
looking at Northern Lights, but you get to enjoy wine and have a nice little fireplace and
and
snack.
it's fun for the kids to be in a bubble.
Yeah.
It's like a tent. You're making a fort.
Right. There's all those blankets and pillows, and oh, it was a blast.
Oh, that is really, really cool that they do that. And so for them, because they are like a big estate.
Oh, massive.
They're big,
Absolutely
yeah.
massive. And they actually just added not long ago, they have a bubbles room where you can just go do a bubbles tasting and you get to sit in the fancy bubbles room to do your bubbles tasting. And it's actually really cool because they have all of these CDs and vinyls that are hanging from every
Ooh,
kind of like chandeliers. Is very, very
ooh,
cool decor.
ooh. I'm liking that. I'm liking that. So Chateau Saint Michel, like that is a big one for folks to go do. But now Matthews Winery, also Woodinville. So tell us about them because they seem like they're more of like sustainability. That's a big deal.
It
I'm
is.
yeah,
I'm really big on teaching my kids about, traveling responsibly, eco-friendly, sustainable, teaching these things very, very young. And so what's really cool about a lot of these, like St. Michel and Matthews, like these are big wineries. These are big names in the wine industry because you can find their wines almost anywhere across the US.
hmm
Obviously, mostly here in the Pacific Northwest, but I mean, you can find a Chateau Saint Michel. I remember my aunt was visiting when we went there, and she was so excited because that's the wine that she buys in South Dakota, and that's one of her favorite wines. And she now gets to visit the winery, and she was so excited about it. So, like, these are big names, and a lot of times when you associate like a really big name winery, you would think that it makes it less accessible for families because they have this reputation.
yeah,
However, I think that that's just it's so wrong because these are the ones that they are established, but that means that they have the opportunity and the means to make more
yeah.
changes and more accessibility for families that are coming in with small kids and the tasting room options and all of these things. And so, we had tasting room attendants that have come over and explained things very specifically to my daughter because she was showing an interest. And so they would break it down to a third grade level and explain things
Nice.
to her because they wanted to bring her into the conversation as well. They didn't want to talk over her or talk down to her. They brought her into the conversation. And I love it when people do
Yeah,
that.
because then they're treating her like an adult. They're giving her some respect and that creates responsibility, you
Absolutely.
know? And
And it
then it's
engages
oh,
my daughter in a way that she feels valued. So she wants to participate in a, productive manner because she could participate in a negative way and just make a
mhm.
scene of everything. But instead, she's obviously very comfortable at wineries. She knows the ins and outs of all of these cellars and the tanks and the barrels and the cleaning and
Cool.
all these other stuff because she's seen literally
Yeah.
from harvest to production. She has helped harvest grapes in four
Excellent.
states and three countries, and she has stomped grapes and helped clean barrels and I mean all the things. So she's very comfortable at these places. But
Mm,
even without that kind of experience, it's about the mindset of the people who are,
hmm
who are working at these wineries that really makes a difference because somebody who has kids who's never been into a winery before, but what they're saying is interesting and then they're engaging them. Now you've sparked something in them, and now that could feed their interest in the future.
That's really true. I mean, just in so many ways because there's so many different careers that can come off of wine. You know
Oh,
what I mean? Hospitality, farming, science, the arts, even. That's the thing about wine. I always go, you find a really good wine and then it's going to go away. And I always cry about that. It's like, it's temporary art. It is.
fortunate.
It's like, where? But DeLille Cellars, am I pronouncing it DeLille? Um,
Yeah,
I've heard of them before. Aren't they supposed to be super fun?
they are actually. It's a fun group that runs that winery. They also have like a lot of live music because of their outdoor
Oh, nice.
seating area. So they have a ton of, and like that Hollywood district there in Woodinville. What I love about it is that it's such a community. One
Mm.
winery will host and pay for the food trucks, and one will pay for the music, and one will
Oh,
pay for
cool.
this, and then they will all group together and do one event. And so you could go to one event for live music on Fridays, and you can support three or four different wineries in the midst of these little districts in there in Woodinville because they're so close together. I mean, there's
That's cool.
literally strip malls of tasting rooms. And so you
Ooh.
park and just taste through an entire building.
I feel like I need a wheelbarrow. Someone needs to push me around from
There's
one.
enough food in those places dispersed through that you can, stop and eat and have
You
lunch.
can have some sustenance. Yeah, talk about sustainability. I need to be able to sustain myself as I go around. But
Sustain
this is
yourself
so
and
cool.
standing upright.
Yeah, when there's music and things, that's great for the kids too, to be able to just have a good time. I'm looking at, so is it WIT sellers or WIT sellers? Whatever it takes.
It's wit.
WIT.
I love these guys. So the very first time I ever tasted at them, we were actually over in Yakima. And then it's
Oh,
nice that
okay.
they're so close over to where I am now because obviously I don't want to drive 3 hours to Yakima every time I want their wine. So the first time we ever tasted with them, like I said, was over in Yakima, but they had live music that night. They also had they had two bookcases full of board games. And they had
Oh,
like
cool.
adult board games that you shouldn't play around kids because of the things that people are going to say. They had those up at the very top, and they had a
Hmm.
certain time of the night that you were allowed to play those. So that way they
Okay.
knew it was less likely that kids were going to be around. So they
Hmm.
had a time on when they could play them. And then they kind of ranked them by age back down.
Uh-huh.
So on the very bottom where it's easy grabbing, there was kids games. There was
Oh, cool.
Uno, and there was Snakes and Ladders, and there was
Oh,
then
cool.
you go up and then it goes like to Monopoly. So they had things there and available for everyone to play. And you could go and they set it up in a way that I love because it reminds me so much of living in Europe where you don't just come do a tasting and then leave. They have it set up where you can come and you can hang out and play games and just sit and sip on a glass of
And
wine
enjoy.
and just enjoy the atmosphere.
Yeah, and that's going to take it further, because people are going to go, "Oh, let's take another bottle home,"
Oh, absolutely. Take another bottle home. Let's stay
and
here. Like, let's
let's
open
have a case.
wine. Right. Like, we love the wine and we love the atmosphere. Let's take that same wine back home with us so we can replicate this a little, right?
I
And
like that.
it was so welcoming. And again, I was traveling alone with two kids and
Yeah.
I mean, the owners actually, they were flying out that night because their daughter was having their first grandbaby. And so they were going to fly for the birth. And so they were like getting practice with my son, who was only, 4 months old at the time.
Oh,
And
wow.
they were like walking around with him and they were serving wine while one of them had him on the hip and hanging out and bringing the family in.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, what's Goose Ridge like? I'm doing all the Woodenvilles together here because you've got a lot of Woodenvilles.
I do have a lot
So,
of windmills. And it's because like there are a lot of like urban wineries. Like there's an entire website and Facebook group that you can follow, the Seattle urban wineries. So there's
oh, okay.
several, but not all of them are wineries themselves. They're like wine
Tasting rooms.
bars,
Oh,
group
okay.
tasting. So there's like a lot of wineries that don't have the funds or they're too small to
Okay.
have their own tasting rooms. So they have these big communal ones set up where a lot of people can
Nice.
come in with a lot of different wineries. So there's like one of them that can have, I think this Soto that has, I think 5 or 6 different wineries all located in one where you can taste through.
That's fun.
Yeah, and it makes it way more accessible for these smaller boutique wineries because they can't afford to have a whole tasting room and a staff and produce everything.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, but the Woodinville ones, I mean, this Goose Ridge is another big name here in Washington. So they originate over in Yakima as well,
Okay.
but they have two other tasting rooms, and the one in Woodinville is actually my very first time I ever went to Woodinville, was in June of 2017.
Okay.
And oh no, excuse me, 2018, because my daughter had just turned 1.5. So she was 1.5, really little.
Okay.
Graduated from college. I had my ceremony up there in Seattle because at the time we were living in Idaho and I wanted to go up wine tasting. So again, a big group of us went. My daughter was with us and we went up there and they just had all of the fun stories. The first time I ever heard the joke, one of the double bottles of wine,
Mm-hmm.
they said, what's great about this is if, this is the perfect size to drink with two people, if the other person doesn't drink.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fun stuff.
Yep.
That's cool.
And I had never heard that joke before because again, I was very young in the wine industry and just the atmosphere of the whole tasting experience was amazing. They have an outdoor patio area as well, so we were able to
Mhm.
sit outside and enjoy the beautiful summer. And then they also have ciders available there. So my sister
Oh,
who was
that's
with
cool.
us, she's not a big wine drinker or wasn't at the time. I've kind of converted her a little, but they have a whole line of ciders available as well. And you can do a cider tasting as well as doing a wine tasting. So it's nice that they have something that's not just wine for people who, you're going with a
Yeah,
group of people and you might not like wine as much, but you like ciders or beers or something else. And so I
yeah.
appreciate it when wineries have something else for people.
Just for the other person.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. And sometimes, they have something different that I think if you go with someone that isn't really a big wine person, you talk to the winery and see if the winery has like, here's like our gateway wine.
Yeah. Or like my
Try this, you
My husband
know.
does not like wine, which is really
Oh,
funny because you would think that with all the wine stuff that I do, that I would have converted him as well. But we actually just
yeah.
do several wineries in Oregon as a family, and
Okay.
several of those wineries because Oregon is also really big with a lot of those like smaller breweries and all these fun
Yeah.
urban breweries as well. A lot of the wineries will stock beers from the breweries that are close to them in the winery. So he was able to sit and have a beer while I did my wine tasting, and it was perfect.
Works out nicely. No, I like that. I like that. Now, okay, so in Seattle, we want to go to the Soto Urban Works because that's where they've got all these different wineries in under one roof, which I love that kind of thing. It's just like, when you go to those big food halls,
Yeah,
sometimes they have wineries and breweries in them, and then it's like
love
the
places.
food halls are super fun. And I love it because it's more sustainable for restaurants. It's more
It,
sustainable for all of them. And they have a shot at making it. And sometimes you don't need to be huge to enjoy your work. And you know what I mean? It's a nice balance. I
it
like
is.
that.
I like that as well because, your example with the food halls, it's nice because at that point there's something for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So when you go to a food hall, maybe somebody wants a burger and somebody wants seafood, another person wants noodles or pizza or whatever. And you have the opportunity where everybody can get what they want, but
Hmm.
you can still all eat together. And with
Right.
smaller, like Soto, it's perfect for that because you might really like white reds and I love red wines or excuse me,
Hmm.
white wines and then I love reds or somebody only likes bubbles. And
Yeah.
so they have an opportunity where again, something for everybody.
Or just give it all to me. It's
Or
all
just
right.
right.
Give
I
me
mean, I'm
those double bottles. Yeah,
just
right. Well, but that's the thing too is you get to try these boutique wineries that sometimes it's really mom and pop, right? It's the
out
husband
of
and wife
somebody's garage.
working their butts off to make this wine, and they are not in this space to, can I take your order? No,
I
they're
know.
they're
They're
hauling. Yeah,
focus
and
is, and it's great for the wineries when they have enough that where they can send out their
mhm,
product, but they're not big enough to get their own space. And so there's
yeah,
another winery that's up in Woodinville, and I mean obviously I reference them a lot because there's a lot of them, but it's called Guardian Cellars,
mhm.
and it's a journalist and a cop who are married who um
They got the beat.
right. They met on a case. I believe that what they talk the story is that they met on a murder case. She was
Oh
reporting on
wow,
was working it and, fell in love and did the whole life thing, but they actually have two labels and one's the newspaper label, and then the other one is the like everything is police themed. So there's like
cool.
the chalk outline, and then there's like the perp walk, or I can't remember all of the label
Oh
name.
my gosh, yeah, that's fun though.
It's fun, but they started in their garage as something that he was getting close to retiring, and so they needed to have a plan B for after retirement. And they both liked wine, and so they said, "Okay, let's give it a shot." And so they started making wine and they started having good wine, and now they're building up their production a little bit. They have a little bit more that they can make and sell, but they don't have a space to share it,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
that's why these, like the Urban Works is perfect for that because you have the opportunity to start getting your name out there and people to try your stuff, but
Mm.
it's still on a small scale. So it's a great first stepping stone to what becomes these great wineries later after
Because
they
even those little ones can't even do restaurants and things. It's like to do wholesale,
touch it too little.
it's too, yeah, it just doesn't work out. One of the wineries that comes on our show all the time is Bell's Up Winery in Oregon.
Mm,
And they do Pinots, but they do other varietals as well, because of course they're in Willamette Valley, but they're so small. I mean, again, husband and wife team.
yeah.
So what he does, they've totally flipped it. They're not selling it online, but you can call him, and that's what he says. You want to buy wine? You call me so I can make sure you get the right kind of wine that you are looking for. And
Ah,
so that's how he does it. And so they'll ship it, but they do tastings via Zoom, so someone could get a case of wine with all their friends, and
mm-hmm.
he does a tasting with you and goes through it and explains the varietal and how they grew it because they took over a Christmas tree farm, and then they do it. I'm not here to plug them, but but they rock,
Oh,
and their
no.
wine is fabulous. But then people go when they're out in Portland area and whatever, they
Mm-hmm.
go there, they book a tasting, and they sit down and have these conversations. And he says, he's able to where people go, oh, I don't like red wine. They'll go, okay, well, let's try this and taste and get to what was the problem of the last red wine that you had that
Right.
didn't work for you, or what if the corking was foul and you just don't know. There's all kinds of
Absolutely.
stories. Could be, everyone talks about the sulfites in red wine, but there's all these different reasons. And basically, listen, there's no such thing as a red wine headache except for the next morning. But
That's true. It's because you didn't drink enough water.
exactly, that is exactly the truth. So
Mm,
just drink water and you'll be fine.
I
You
know.
know,
I'm
it's
totally for that. But
gets all the
you're
balance.
right.
Yeah,
In that personalized, that one-on-one connection, like
it's
those are the
awesome.
wineries that make a difference
Yeah,
to,
you got to go there. You got to go.
oh, okay.
No,
Twist.
because they've their family. Their family too. They've got kids. So you got to go.
And that's what I love is that the dynamic is shifting because
Yeah.
again, here we are in the US and we have these mom and pop and guess what? They have kids and mom,
Everybody has a dog. Come on.
right? Everybody has a dog. Like I've seen more dog friendly like signs on the wineries than I've seen like kid friendly.
Yeah, you have a dog and you have cornhole. I learned how to do cornhole now.
Oh,
I've stayed on wineries. That's the other thing.
I'm
Some of the
still
wineries have Airbnbs attached to them. I mean, there's all kinds of cool experiences. But all right, let's go to that last one too. The Eight Bells. Oh, talking about Bells Up, right? Now we're going to another Bells. Eight Bells Winery. So this is in Seattle, right? In the
yes.
Roosevelt
The
neighborhood.
little urban one that is just really, really fun. So they don't own any land. They buy their grapes from
Okay.
other. So I learned this in the wine industry is that there's this big misconception that if you go to a winery, there's going to be vineyards attached to the winery. And
Yeah,
that's
no,
not the case because that's
no.
unrealistic. It's millions of dollars to have a vineyard. And so a lot of the wineries that they will work with wine growers, that's all they do is just grow these beautiful grapes specifically for wine. And they work with the wine growers and they find out which ones that really work for
No.
them and that reflects the style that they want. And then they buy the grapes and they source them from different places. A lot of the times it's going to be in that like for here, Yakima is like a huge growing area because it's like the mecca of perfect seasons,
Yeah.
perfect land. Like the terroir is amazing for growing grapes there. And it's just beautiful. Those that is a place where vineyards are everywhere, but you can't always afford to buy them. And so they source the grapes and then they make it the wines the way that they want to. So they'll probably have a crushing facility or they go to a community crushing facility.
Yeah.
And a third option is also they have these mobile crushing facilities that you can rent for a week at a time. And then you have to have all of your stuff ready to go. Grapes have got
Mm.
to be in. You schedule your time beforehand, hoping that your grapes come in at the right time. And then
Yeah, it's wild to do
the
that.
mobile crushing facility will show up to the back end of your tasting facility and you do everything on site. It goes into the tubs and then it starts the fermentation process. And then when it gets to the next process where you have to filter everything out, goes into barrels or tanks or whatever, you rent the next step. And so it makes it really easy for these urban wineries like that to be able to do all of their processing on site, without
Mm,
having to have the big, owning their own production, because urban wineries in downtown Seattle, they're not going to have space for that.
no, no, no.
So
But
it's
I
like
mean, there's
leveling things.
all these different options, which is fantastic,
It is.
and then,
It creates a lot of options for, not only just the winemakers and the wineries themselves, but then also for people who are interested in the wine industry to learn about the
mhm,
differences on how sustainable these smaller boutique wineries can be, as well as also families who want to go to these places and they can understand and do these tours about how different these places are.
mhm.
And so it really does kind of come full circle for people.
Well, I think also when people are visiting Seattle, as a family vacation, they
Mhm.
want to know, hey, the hotel is like 2 blocks. Hey, wait, there's wine. We can, let's get off the plane and have some wine. You know,
Absolutely.
it's the first thing you should do. Here, give the kid a little bit.
And I will say that if you fly Alaska Airlines in and out of Seattle, wines fly for free with Alaska Airlines. They have a program where you can have like a big old box of wine that you can get
What?
from wineries, and wines fly for free.
That is a very cool tip.
Yep.
That is really a
Anywhere.
very cool tip.
There's a lot of different places. I actually worked with Alaska Airlines when we were living in Idaho. That Boise is now a hub for this. But if you've got an area that's major wine industry, that Alaska Airlines flies in and out of, there is a program where it says wines fly free. So Seattle is one of them. Portland is one. Several places in California. Boise, a lot of places up here in the Pacific Northwest. I believe there's also a place in Nevada that has it. I believe Albuquerque is one of them. Um, I'm not exactly sure on places on the West Coast, but I do know my hubs here in the Pacific Northwest. So if
That's cool.
you want to take wines home, they can fly for
Yeah. That's very cool. Well, this has been such like a fun conversation.
okay.
I don't have kids, but I feel like a kid. Like I'm just,
Yeah.
but I wanted to ask, so I know you pack things, you take, toys and stuff like that. And one of your tips in your article was about things that attach to the table. Like,
Yes. Suction cup toys, man. They are
oh,
a game changer. There's so many things that came out because there's a big age difference between my first and my second. So my daughter, she just turned 8 and my son turns 1 next month.
yeah.
So big age difference between the two, but that also means that there's so many more new toys and inventions that have come out for kids now that were not there when my daughter was little. And so there's this one that I have. It's a silicone mat that suctions down to a flat surface, and it has these little silicone ties that attach off of it, and you can attach toys to them, so you don't have to play the mom pickup game.
Oh,
Every
and trip people
time
up. Yeah.
thing, it will catch it instead of it falling to the floor, and you have to play catch and fetch every time your children drop
Yeah.
something.
Very cool.
It is like the greatest thing ever. And I have one of them. It's like there's a big one that's a big 4 piece. So it has 4 different ties. And then it's like an actual mat where you can put food. It has like a little section that has a raised lip where you can put food on it. And then there's a small travel one that I take on the planes with me that I stick it up against the wall, or on the tray on planes, and
Uh-huh.
that way it can stay there and hang out, and that way I don't have to try and search for things under a very crowded
There
seat.
are tools. There
There
are
are
tools for
tools.
parents.
It,
Yeah, somebody, people, mommies invented things. We know that.
no kidding.
Yeah, this is
Game
cool. This
changer.
is cool. So, how long have you been a member of IFTWA, the
I
International Food Wine Travel Writers Association? How to say it
Yes.
all.
So I actually just joined, I believe it
Cool.
was September, October of last year. So I'm still very, very new into it. But again, with my background and my history, with all the food, wine, and travel that I have done,
Yeah, this is like
it just
perfect.
aligned perfectly. And the amount of opportunities that I've had to working with them in, getting to know other people and networking, and then also the opportunities to write for the Food, Wine, and Travel magazine, and being able to share stories on a different platform besides just my own blog has
Mhm.
been Really, really a fun experience. And then again, just the people that you get to meet is so fascinating.
That's cool. And then they have the conference coming up. I
They
know
do.
in October in Lafayette, Louisiana, you have to do rum.
So I won't be there because I'll be at the Balloon Fiesta in Albuquerque,
Oh,
unfortunately.
well, that's fun too. Albuquerque rocks.
Yeah,
And
Albuquerque.
have you gone to some of the wineries there?
I've been to, we actually almost, my husband and I almost got married at one of them. Um,
Oh,
I haven't been back actually since we went to go search for wedding venues. So that was, 14 years ago. But
the Casa Rodina, I think is
yeah, that's one of my husband's grandparents live there, and she loves the grandmother loves going. So we were
yeah.
going back and visiting for
Yeah,
sure.
we got to interview the winemaker there.
Oh, very.
Really cool, very cool. And it's really, such a very historic area
Mhm.
of grape growing too for wines. I mean, it's
So
one
many
of
people not think of that.
and they do bubbly down more in the southwest corner, I think, near Deming is like there's a bubbly place, and I'm not going to say it right, so I'm not going to say it because I can't. I no, it's not
You
going
don't
to
want
be
to butcher
right.
it, but
But
I'll have to.
anyway, New Mexico has great wine. It really
Absolutely.
does. And so does Texas. Well,
So does
we have
Texas.
wine
Great
everywhere.
wines.
So it's good. It's good. Well, everyone, please check out ifwtwa.org to learn more about the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association. We do 3 shows a month with them, which is a lot of fun. Um, Go to backpackermom.com. Did I do that right?
The
Oh,
backpacker mom.
the, excuse
Yes.
me,
The.
the backpackermom.com. And I've got the link to the article of which is the top 8 family-friendly wineries in and around Seattle. That is linked in the episode notes as well, or you can go to blendradioandtv.com. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun, Felicia, to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. And this has been a great conversation.
It is. It is. I want to go have some wine now. We should have done this at
No kidding.
happy hour. We could have pretended we were in Europe.
We could have
Yeah.
missed opportunity. Yeah, next time, I guess.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFTWA, which is ifwtwa.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone!